Ingram Smith, Bud Elliott, back again for another episode of the Nolecast. Sometimes it just goes live and it says second one, then sometimes it goes live and it says like second 10. So if you are sitting there and watched me or listened to me give you 8 seconds of silence, apologies. But off we go. Bud got a bunch of different stuff to talk about. You've been having your eye on the draft and a couple other things. I was down in Tallahassee last weekend for football related stuff, so we can both draw upon those experiences and put together another Nolecast. As always, want to thank our friends. FSUHomeLoans.com is the website. Chad is the guy you're working with. This is the group that has brought you more than 500 closings via the Nolecast, one of the better partnerships that anybody could ever ask for in American podcasting. Bud's done it twice. I'm still looking at a place in Virginia that I will draw upon their expertise if and when that should occur, and can promise you there's no better group to go through the mortgage process with other than Chad and his team.
Absolutely, man. They do a tremendous job, and I may see Chad this weekend, actually. So looking forward to that. I got a lot of things on the list today. Do we care about court storming? I feel like that's been all over Twitter. I really don't give a damn about court storming. I think Jay Billis' idea to arrest people who court storm is not going to happen.
Yeah, just beat the hell out of them. Otherwise, I mean that happens in Europe a lot. If you run out on the field of play, you catch a beating. So, realize you're not going to be able to do that to 2,000 people, but there probably do need to be consequences for, for people. And all this has been talked about it before. We don't want to talk about it, but also, like, it's one thing to storm court. It's another thing to storm court while trying to take a selfie or a video of yourself and like inadvertently run into a bunch of people.
Right.
Technology, unfortunately, has made what was a dumb activity a very, very stupid one. So
I think you almost have to like embrace it, normalize it, and be like, okay, like, hey, we will storm the court. You need to wait like 10 seconds, until the other team gets off, or just like have the security walk the visiting team off.
Here's what I'll say about this. Because I see it in another sport. So I enjoy watching some college wrestling occasionally. Okay, don't get to not watching a dual meet on a Tuesday night or something like that, but I'll pay attention to the Big Tens and then the NCAA. Almost 90% of the boil over points that you have in college wrestling is when the guy goes and shakes the other hand's team and either mouths off to a coach or somebody else on the bench or whatever. My point here is we can do away with like the handshakes, stuff like that. Just people, game's over, people get off the court. And, if you want to run around and jump in the middle of the logo at the center court, then I guess that can be what you do. But just whatever we can do to expedite the clearing of the court is probably a good decision at this point.
I think I agree with you there. Okay, so I found most of that discussion boring. I just wanted to see if we had any like unique solutions for it. Speaking of proposals, the word that I think some of the reporters are using now is socializing. So the members of the college football playoff management group, not the committee, they're socializing a 14-team playoff plan. Have you got your eyes on this thing yet?
Yeah, I have looked at it a little bit, familiar with some of the number breakdown. Just going to take a second for me to get used to this in general. Somebody sent me the odds for the playoffs a couple days ago.
Oh, yeah.
And I almost texted you because I had forgotten we were moving to 12. And I'm like, I'm not a big odds man, but none of these odds make sense. But yeah, then I was like, oh, yeah. No, it's different next year.
Exactly. So 14 teams basically is the Big Ten and the SEC saying like, hey, we expanded our leagues. We are worried that we're not going to get enough of our teams in and our teams are not going to be happy. We can't really take away the G5's automatic bid because then we not that we would lose the antitrust case, but we would probably have an antitrust case on our hands. And that's not really something that we want to fight right now. So we need to figure out a way to make sure the G5 still has a bid. We need to make sure we have a way to get the votes to do what we need to do. And we need to have something we can present to ESPN so that this TV deal that we've essentially signed with them, meaning we as in the college football playoff has essentially signed with ESPN, can be officially finalized. Because it's not done because the format starting in 2026 is not done. So the logical endpoint here is that you add teams while keeping the same number of AQs for the G5, and you try to kind of horse trade a little bit with the number of AQs for the Big 12 and the ACC. The current proposal is that the Big 10 and SEC each get 3, which I think you and I said on the show, like there's zero chance that anybody's going to vote for each of those leagues to get 4. And then the Big 12 and the ACC each get 2 automatic qualifiers, and the G5 gets 1. Notre Dame, if they finish in the top 14, would essentially gobble up 1, which would leave 2 or 3 at-large spots, which in my modeling is almost always going to be filled by Big 10 and SEC teams anyway.
2 of the 3 will almost certainly be. Yeah.
Exactly. Like there's so rare a situation where you have 3 ACC teams that are really in that caliber. Which honestly, I don't mind this that much. If this is all it was, like it is an admission.
If TV money wasn't a thing, I'd say just stay in the ACC and let's roll. Yeah.
Right. Now, here's the other problem with this. Okay, so do I think it's equitable for the Big 10 SEC to have one more auto bid than the ACC? Yeah, I do actually. Right? I mean, there's like 3 teams in the ACC, if you want to stretch it, that are like serious. Hey, if they made the playoff, could win the playoff type teams, and that's kind of a stretch because Miami hadn't done a damn thing for about a quarter century now. But, well, no, that's not true. 2 decades. Accuracy actually matters. But the revenue distribution on this is I think something that's going to be a bit hard to vote for if you are the ACC or the Big 12. So, this is from Pete Thamel's article last night. Sources told ESPN that discussions have centered around the SEC and Big 10 earning somewhere between 25 and 30% of the college football playoff revenue. The ACC and the Big 12 would be next. They'd earn somewhere between 15 and 20%. And that leaves a smaller chunk, somewhere around 6 to 10% for the other leagues and nearly 1% for Notre Dame. Sankey has made it clear that the SEC has delivered 40% of the teams in the playoff, and he's been one of the primary drivers behind a new revenue model. If this is just like, hey, we need these AQs and the money will reflect the AQs, automatic qualifiers, again, I don't really have a massive problem with that. But if this is guaranteeing 30% to each of the SEC and the Big 10, independent of the AQs, that's where I think there is a bit of a problem, because it essentially implies that, let's say the ACC got 4 teams in one year and the SEC only got 3. I don't know. Maybe you have like a 12-0 and 11-1, 11-1 SEC, and everybody else is like 8-4 or worse, and you have 4 ACC teams that are somehow in. The SEC still makes more money off the playoff in that situation. I don't know. That could be a non-starter if you're Jim Phillips. Also, by the way, admitting that your league is inferior by allowing more AQs from the SEC than the ACC. Is that a tenable position for Jim Phillips to vote yes on?
Hmm.
Because they're currently in a lawsuit where they're trying to say like the SEC is a great league, and literally the school we cover is like, I don't know about that. Interesting times here, man.
No, it's a good angle on this, which I hadn't otherwise thought about, to be perfectly honest with you. Yeah, I mean, I would think it's more or less understood at this point, but we all do things for legal posturing that might not match up with that of what everybody wholeheartedly believes. Plus Jim Phillips he's on top of court storming. The first 90 seconds of the pod, he's got that. He'll get his arms wrapped around that pretty quickly.
He is dialed.
Yes.
So I don't know. Like, yeah, I totally agree with you. If not for TV revenue, this is again, I think a lot of things are coming up FSU. I don't think we're going to go to employee model within like the next year or 2. I think eventually we will. I think FSU is fine to compete for the next couple of years. Like obviously their modeling says they're going to be making less money. Agreed. I'm very worried about that in the long term if you didn't get out, but in the short term, like less so. I think they will get out sooner rather than later. But in terms of access, I think you feel pretty damn good about access here, right? If you can't finish top 2 in the ACC, how are you going to do in the playoff? Probably not great. So Access, I think they're pretty well fine for it. I also just kind of wonder, man. I think you and I both think FSU's out of the ACC in short order, and probably sooner rather than later. Um, what happens if they agree to this, and then FSU and Clemson and Miami and somebody else bounce? Do they just kind of reconvene and say, "Well, all right, we have this look back clause here, and we're going to change the number of automatic qualifiers, and the ACC is going to go from a one automatic qualifying team, or from a two to a one," which would make some sense if you lost Clemson, Miami, Florida State, or a couple of others. But right now, you can't do that because you need sort of unanimous consent to change the format, which is the third thing that they're kind of haggling over. It's format, it's revenue distribution, and it's the governance piece there. Right now, you need the unanimous. But I think going forward, they will probably not. This is another thing that they're pushing for to be able to have more flexibility. And I think that the desired flexibility, it really comes from two things. One, the two biggest leagues who have the vast majority of teams that could actually win a title and who draw most of the eyeballs, they want more control. Is that a good thing for the sport? Probably not. But ultimately, it is what it is. Money's going to drive this sport. They also want to be able to change things more rapidly without having as many concessions, which if you lost FSU, Clemson, Florida State, Miami, from the ACC, that would dictate a change in format, I think, because there's no way that the remaining teams in the ACC should have two automatic qualifying bids if you were the perspective of the Big Ten or the SEC, right? Now, if you're the ACC, you're like, hey, stop stealing our teams, right? Type thing. So, that is a pretty interesting piece of this to me. I don't know. We will see kind of what happens there with that. I did see the playoff odds. We can do that real quick if you'd like. So Florida State actually they are tied for the 8th best odds to make the playoff.
Are they negative 240, 250?
Yeah, 250. So
Okay.
let's see. We've got the team. There's actually some interesting tiers here. So Ohio State and Georgia, way up there, like 90% essentially to make. Then Oregon, Texas, also way up there. Then Clemson, Florida State, Kansas State, Michigan, Utah. Actually, no, not scratch Utah there, are all pretty similar. So that's like some interesting tiers. And then you have some Ole Miss, Miami, Arizona, Penn State. Penn State got bet pretty hard, as they should have, I think. Tennessee, Alabama with the 15th best odds to make the playoff. Quite curious there. Then followed by Louisville, Kansas, LSU, Notre Dame. Notre Dame got bet again, by the way. Those are all pretty interesting teams to me. And I think what it implies here is that the ACC is pretty likely to get 2 in this year, which is good.
You would have to think. I mean, yeah. Not that the ACC is in a place of strength to dictate a whole lot, but if you're in this conference, in this setting, and you're only getting 1 in under a 12 team umbrella, then, yeah, that's very, very bad. Yeah, so I would think too, particularly with, Miami looking this is kind of their year. They've done what they've done to build for this year. Yeah, I would think that the ACC would be able to get 2 in, at least.
Totally. Aiden has a live question, or Adrian, sorry, says, do you think teams like Miami, North Carolina, and Clemson would stay if they are promised 2 automatic qualifiers?
Not with the delta and the TV money. I mean, the delta and the TV money is a, unsustainable thing for anybody. I mean, if there's a school that's out there that would love that scenario, in theory, it's Clemson. I mean, they've got IPTAY, they've got, the upstate of South Carolina has been an economic driver for the last 30 years. We've talked about how a bunch of Clemson fans who were, had a couple of 100-acre farms are all of a sudden worth an awful lot of money based off just what's transpired in that part of the country. Um, and Clemson knows that they can't compete with a South Carolina or a Tennessee or a Georgia or whoever else. that they butt up with, both on the field and in recruiting. If you're running at a 35-year negative or $35 million negative delta compared for any kind of prolonged period of time. Not to mention the last decade or so where that, what started at 5.5 or 6 million has now grown to potentially 60. That's crazy. So no.
The only way I could see that to push back on you, and I this is just sort of for the sake of argument. I definitely don't. I definitely don't think that this would happen or is all that realistic. But you said, like, given the current TV money structure, and you're right on this, but that also implies the continuation of even revenue distribution. If it actually comes to nut cutting time, and you're like, hey, Boston College, you have two options. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah, but I mean, to really make that work, you're gonna have to force teams to take like a 10% share. Which, yes,
Correct.
you're right.
Yeah.
Can you walk
No, I was
Wake
thinking
down a
less than
hallway
10.
and okay, like 5%.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, you got to get dry. I mean, can you walk Wake down a hallway and so what is that? That's $1.8 million roughly under the current TV deal. I don't.
Is that
Okay.
more than they make in Conference USA? Is that more than because what is
Well,
Boston College gonna outrate Liberty? Are they gonna
mhm,
outrate uh, Conference
yeah.
USA is a bad example. Uh, how about the American? Right? Like, is what's the difference between Boston College and Tulane as far as TV ratings?
Mhm.
Nothing,
Yeah.
right? So
Very little, if anything. Yep,
also,
agree.
I think the appetite to it's very clear with some of these deals that are going on with leagues that the appetite for the mid-major stuff, if you're trying to scale, is is pretty low. Right now, there's still going to be deals for it, and there's definitely still people who watch it. I'm one of them. I actually enjoy it. I don't need to watch I don't need this playoff stuff shoved down my throat all the time because I don't watch college football just for who's going to win the national title. That's a very small portion of college sports that I enjoy. But
So you don't no, I mean, look, just one quick Google doesn't mean that this is absolutely accurate, but it looks like each team in Conference USA makes about $800,000 a year in TV money. So, okay.
all right, so if you're like, hey, BC, you get 5 million a year in TV money. How do you really think you would do in a renegotiation? Now, they might say, guess what? Florida State, you're paying us 250. Miami, you're paying us 250. Clemson, you're paying us 250. We're rich, right?
Mhm.
And then we'll ride it out from there. Mathematically, it probably makes sense to take the deal and take the beatings. However, the problem is that there's a people problem to this. You can't be the AD at Boston College or the president at Boston College that signs off on this. It's better to go down swinging and make it look like it was something you fought and to lose that fight than it is to try to be proactive, secure more money, even at a vast difference compared to what some of your conference mates are going to make. It's not something you can go back and you can sell to your constituency. So that's why they won't do it, probably. But
Mhm.
I guess in theory, we can't completely write that off, you know? But yeah, right. John Baker in the chat says no way an admin can agree to that. They'd get fired. Totally.
Yeah, I mean, they'd get fired, but I mean, we make jokes all the time that, Wake would be playing like Washington and Lee and,
Yeah.
Ferrum and stuff like that if they're not. I mean, they wouldn't fall that far, but Wake's a school of I don't know what 4,200 people undergrad or something like that. It's uh yeah, you'd have to really be tactful in the art of persuasion, but also very firm and make people realize as to what else is out there. So, uh, yeah, interesting.
Some of these capital projects that some of these schools have debt on, by the way, will probably influence these decisions. You have creditors, and they're going to want to have a say, just like private equity. Like a
Hmm.
lot of these schools do carry some private debt already. So I don't know how many are in the middle of building like new facilities or whatnot, but some of those are pretty lavish and of questionable need if we speed to the employee model quicker than some people think. I don't know if you saw the thing with the Kansas City Chiefs. They rated dead last in the NFL in terms of facility experience and player experience.
Yes.
Yeah,
Yeah. Yeah. A little bit of a reduced level of importance when it comes to Sundays.
exactly. So yeah, I don't think that. Do I think Premier League promotion relegation model will work? No, I don't, because of. I just think it's something. I mean, in theory, it could work, but it just won't work. There's too much like budgeting that goes on,
Yeah.
long term planning, to not know where your footing is. That's one of the reasons FSU is trying to get out of the ACC. They're
Yeah.
totally fine right now. They're fine for 2025. I think they'd be fine for 2026 for the most part. Now, there are some ancillary factors that progressively could make recruiting tougher, right? If you're not in one of these two leagues. But your job's not to plan 2 years ahead. If you're Mike Alford and if you're McCullough, President McCullough, your job is to plan long term. And that's why you kind of have to get out of it.
I don't know that you'll ever see a promotion relegation model in this country, really, in any sport. Just doesn't fit with what ownership's expectations, and you got to realize there's a like it doesn't mean that this body is the owner of all these teams by any means, but in England as the example, there's something called the FA, which oversees all of football within England and the United, yeah, the within England. Um, And so, as an example, there's league cups throughout the season that if you're a level 3 team, you can participate and in theory win a league cup or an FA Cup or whatever else. But there's no like you're not. I don't like. There's a reason why there isn't pro rel in the MLS because owners don't want it. Why? No, nobody's going to buy into this situation and then sign off on the idea of having a triple A or a double A type budget in 5 years because things didn't go well. It's an interesting conversation. I don't know that it's something that we'll see a whole lot of on this side of the pond ever.
I tend to agree with you on that. I had a couple other things here before we get to the next topic. Uh, oh, I really don't care about this summer signing period thing at all. I get it. Coaches and administrators want to reduce their workload at all costs. I don't fault them for this. I think in any job you want to reduce your workload if you can without reducing your pay. And it's a bit like paying with a credit card because with staff turnover, it's going to be chaos. But if you can give yourself more semblance of a summer to be able to take a summer vacation and more, just take the workload off your plate a little bit more with some of this summer signing stuff. I think coaches are going to want to do that. And I don't really think they care about the consequences. We uh, that's the reason why we have December signing period now, is because they
Mhm.
wanted to stop babysitting their commitments essentially in their mind, which in sales we would just call that continuing to manage a relationship to the finish line, which is what everybody in sales kind of has to do. But they wanted to move that finish line up so they could stop maintaining that relationship with the player that they're paid to recruit, and then give themselves uh, 7 more weeks between early signing period and traditional signing period. I think that's what you have here, honestly. Um, do you have any real thoughts on the early signing period stuff?
On the summer signing period,
Yeah,
yeah, we're off a ways from that, in my opinion. Now, maybe we'll see movement there. That would surprise me if they did do that. I would I would wonder if there's not maybe a cap. I mean, you don't. I don't know. I guess if you're going to it, you're going to it. But is there a school out there that would really want? Well, I guess under what you just said, yeah, people like to get work done and have hay in the barn, but I would be hesitant about having 23 kids sign in the summer. Obviously, the
yeah,
the 7 on and the proliferation of 7 on and everything else has sped up the evaluation process. It's also made it much more accurate than what it is. But man, a lot of times you want to see a kid play his senior year of high school football. There's only so many prospects that these schools are full in on at the June before their senior year. Now, look, the top 100 guys, whatever, yeah, obviously. Um, but think about how many schools really recruit from that pool, and I just think you'd be doing a disservice to an awful lot of staffs and an awful lot of schools.
I tend to agree with you on that. I also don't think that many prospects would actually sit out their senior year of high school. Uh, it's not like going from college to the NFL. Like you actually do need the development. Um, so a couple probably would. Running backs would. Like if I was already a running back getting like top five type offers as a junior, I could see sitting out my senior year of high school. It sucks because like it's very business minded, but I mean I saw Leonard Fournette at 16, 17. The only reason that guy couldn't play in the NFL was a rule. Dalvin Cook was ready to play in the NFL at 19 for sure. Adrian Peterson easily could have played in the NFL and played well at 18. Some positions just peak earlier and are ready to go, but most don't. So, yeah, I don't think that many guys would actually sit out. I think if you are a school, you're not really excited about that. You'd be pretty disappointed, I think, if a player showed that level of non-competitiveness that he wants to sit out his entire senior year of high school. Uh, you better be a damn good player if you want to get some serious marketing opportunities. It also really hurts your marketing opportunities, by the way, to sit out and not play. Playing is good for your marketing opportunities overall. I lost you, I think. It was working before. And then uh-oh. I think we lost Graham for a second. Yeah, so ultimately, I don't think this early signing period is going to be that big of a problem. Hey, Chad's in the chat now. Nice. He was slinging some loads. Bingo, buddy. Yeah, does early signing period impact FSU that much? Kind of doubt it. Graham, you want to be added back to the stage? Yo.
All right, you got me?
Yes, I do.
Yeah, I'm not sure what happened there. Sometimes StreamYard, if you disconnect a mic or something accidentally, it won't re-recognize it.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, all I was saying there is that you would, you need those reps as a player. You need to, like in soccer, not to go back to that, but they talk about the need that you need to go out and get X thousand amount of touches a day just with the ball, and to steal a senior year from you is, I would be very concerned about what that would take from your developmental arc as a player as well. So,
Totally. Let's take another sponsor, and then let's talk a little more about the NFL Combine stuff because that is coming up this week.
absolutely want to thank our good friend Matt Lewis, the team at Congruity. Matt and his team have been with us for many years now, and we're proud of the amount of Seminole owned and Seminole affiliated businesses we've sent to them. CongruityHR.com is the website. And as always, if you want to try to DM me on Twitter or X or whatever else, happy to make a third party introduction. I'm also going to shamelessly mention another former sponsor of ours and current sponsor as we continue to work with him, but Home Field Bud, uh, partnering with the Battle's End in an announcement that I think was
Nice.
made at 8:50 this morning or maybe 9:50. But we'll be able to continue to send people to our friends at Home Field. Bud and I've loved working with him for years, and that's a good, fun little partnership there that'll be able to give people the opportunity to buy home field apparel and support collectives such as the Battle's End at the same time. So
Very, very cool, man. Awesome job there. So let me see. Oh, the chat thought that we had too many people in the chat, so that's why I kicked you off.
yes,
That's awesome.
I'd love to get there at some point. Yes.
That would be great. Okay, so which you can help us by liking the video, subscribing to the channel, obviously. Combine stuff. Who do you think needs to have the best combines? Like for who has the most draft capital? I'm not gonna say money, but like who has the most most ability to really improve or I guess potentially fall at
I
the
mean,
combine?
if it's a money thing, I think it's Keon actually.
Yeah.
He's only going to fall so far, but it's a deep year for wide receivers. And Keon's overall athleticism is through the roof, but I do think people will probably overly fixate on that 40. So that's the thing that could see a guy be a top 15 pick or maybe a top, 10 picks of the second round or something like that. I don't think there's a whole lot of room for Keon to fall, but there are a lot of wide receivers, and his performance will will dictate that. And as far as the delta of money that's out there, the difference between pick number 15 and pick number 15 in the second round is very, very significant. Uh, I'll be very proud of Keon, and he'll make a good amount of money either way. But he would much rather have it come on the front end. I can assure you. So
I agree with you on that. I've been looking at some of these draft stuff, and again, they're all going to change pretty hard. But if you look at some of the grinding the mock draft data, there's a real kind of consolidation of the top three receivers: Marvin Harrison, Neighbors, and then Adunze. It seems like many of them have Brian Thomas of LSU fourth. I think you're totally right with this Keon thing, because we saw Keon kill it in fall camp. We saw Keon dominate against LSU, and that he got banged up, and it was a knee thing, from what I recall, like maybe a bone bruise or something.
it's a contusion of some kind, if I recall correctly. Yeah.
And he did not have the same level of burst there on after. We talked about the teams would challenge Jordan to make the throws down the field. Uh, that was not only a challenge to Jordan, it was also a challenge to Keon and to Johnny Wilson. Could they take the top off of a defense? Could they really get deep? We spoke often on this show about how they actually missed Pokey Wilson because of his deep speed. And speed, explosive speed, what was an issue for this offense last year. Now, I'm not going to sit here and tell you that Keon is an absolute burner, but he, I believe, is much twitchier than what he showed through the final 10 games of the season, because he was dealing with something. If you're Keon, you got to hope FSU's got really good GPS data on you from fall camp, or maybe from that LSU game. There's a lot of the football vision motion capture stuff now
Mhm.
in games. Team can do. Sport Radar is doing some stuff, obviously, and there's a bunch of different.
You can give the compass data. Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of stuff out there, and I don't. I just think Keon has to prove that it's there. I mean, look, you can. He ran some fairly impressive times at Miss State, if I remember correctly. It just the 40 is a very failed barometer at which to judge a football player and future success. But
Yeah,
people will want to see that. It was from the pit game on, very different player. So
yeah, totally. So it's going to be big for him. I don't think it's a huge combine for Johnny Wilson as far as downside. I think there is potential upside for Johnny Wilson if he rips off a really good time, because that is going to change the conversation around him. Not change, solidify. I think if he runs a really good time, people are like, okay, he's a receiver, not a hybrid receiver tight end. Because I've seen some mocks where he's sort of listed as a tight end. For money wise, receivers make more than tight ends. That just to kind of clue the audience in here. You want to be classified as a receiver. Jaheim got invited, correct?
he did.
So that's a huge one for him. I've been listening to some of these analytics podcasts. I just try to get better at my craft every off season. Metrics translate the best positionally for tight end. There is
Mm,
no superstar tight end in the NFL who did not have like a 95th percentile athletic score at the combine.
okay, interesting. Yeah,
Jaheim is tiny compared to a
and
lot of these guys. If he does not rip off a crazy good time and have unbelievably good drills,
mhm.
he's not going to get drafted high
It's
at
the
all.
evolution of the sport, and just bringing in the small forwards and power forwards
Right.
from basketball and turning them into tight ends. Yeah, interesting that you say that. So yeah. I mean, there's some downside, but then you're like a guy who I think personally very highly of, one of my favorite players I interacted with all year, Tatum Bethune. Is Tatum, if he has a great combine, is that really going to drive him up the boards a whole lot? Yeah, it might lift him around from where he would have gone otherwise. It might guarantee him getting drafted. Um, but I don't think there's a whole lot of downside there. Now, I will be as it's been a long, long time since I stepped on a scale in competition, bud, but I'm very familiar with the way the body fluctuates with weight and how much weight you can carry and water weight and everything else. Um, I hope Deloach is doing the inverse of what I did a lot of times before weigh-in. I hope he's drinking as much as he possibly can. I mean, he is. Trust me, these guys have been paired with pros really since the first or second week in December, so they're getting um, top level advice on everything from nutrition to I don't in my mind I don't think Deloach is in a hotel room trying to do push-ups to get ready for the NFL combine or something like that. But I'll be interested to see where he weighs. I think at one of those all-star or East-West games or whatever it was, he weighed in at like 206, 207 or something.
And
That's
5'11".
that's
Yeah.
tough from an NFL angle. It is. So,
Totally.
um,
And it's like if you're an evaluator and you like the player, you like the player. But you listen to these evaluators, it's a job. And you have to turn around, you have to sell it to your team president, you got to sell it to your owner, right? Hey, we're going to use a 7th round draft pick on a guy who's 5'11", 205 at linebacker. Bro, we got safeties that are bigger than that running better times. Like that, those are the kind of questions you are going to get as an NFL evaluator. Like it's a pretty cutthroat business, and like your job's on the line. I agree with you. I think he needs to have a good weigh in and also have some really good testing times. To it's all relationship, right? If you're smaller, you better be really really quick. If you're bigger, you can get away with a little bit less quickness. Um, Let me see here. Is it a stretch to put Braden Fisk in round 2?
no, it's not.
I think he's probably like DT 5 right now or DT 6. I've been looking at some of this stuff. So he's going to be behind Jenkins. He's going to, there's a bunch, I don't know. I was trying to think about this last night. There's the Murphy kid. Actually, there's a couple more I had on my list. Let me just pull it up. It's probably easier. I could see him maybe sneaking in the background of round 2 if he puts up some really good times. Like,
We, Look, we still got a couple, not quite 2 months before draft. So, I'll just say this. Maybe it's true in April. Maybe it's not. But from talking to NFL people, the 3 Florida State players whose draft is rapidly ascending are the 2 cornerbacks in Fisk.
yeah,
Jones, Duda, and Fisk are the 3 guys who a lot of teams have had to reevaluate and take up as far as like a full round on their board. So, um, if Fisk keeps doing what he's doing, not a whole lot would surprise me.
okay, so I agree with you. All right, so Newton, the Illinois kid, is kind of widely seen as DT1, I guess. Murphy, uh, Darius Robinson's more of an end. I'm not going to count him. Like, could he go over Travondre Sweat, the other Texas kid? I guess in theory, like we shouldn't speak in absolutes. There's 2 months till the draft. Who knows what he's going to run? But have you seen Chris Jenkins? You know what a Turkish get up is?
Mm-hmm.
Did you see Chris Jenkins' Turkish get up with the 170-pound dumbbell?
I have not seen that. No.
Bro. If you don't think genetics matters.
Oh, well, yeah.
His dad was an absolute freak show on that Carolina team that almost beat I guess they didn't almost beat the Patriots, but they played hard for a little bit in the Super Bowl there. Behind Mason Smith for LSU. Again, because Mason Smith his top is so freakish, that's one we're going to have to watch. Like that's something that Fisk can't really control. If Smith is all of a sudden 100%, that's beyond Braden's control. I think Braden is, as you said, rising up draft boards. Like it's pretty impressive. Do you think Renardo needs a really good time? I think he has so much good tape, and people understand what he is with his technique and his press coverage.
Yeah, he'll have to run a time kind of to what you alluded to a second ago, where it doesn't make you have to justify drafting him if you're a player personnel guy. But I think, look, everybody still has work to do. But I think between his tape and what he did at, I guess it was East West. I don't need to keep going back to which one it was, but yeah, at his senior All Star game or whatever was impressive. He's on a lot of people's boards, and a lot of people are fairly comfortable with their evaluation of him, as I understand it, just based off what translates from tape and what they've been able to do and what they've been able to take away from that.
I think that's very fair. Is there anybody else we're missing that needs a really good combine? Oh, Benson has we don't do the Prize Pick sponsorship in the off season, but I do still dabble at times. I did notice Trey Benson 4.39 is his more or less from Prize Picks.
I mean, should we text him to feel how his hamstrings are doing, or
Yeah, I think so, man.
I don't think that would be particularly fair nor appreciated.
Probably not.
Yeah, don't text me right now. I'm kind of more focused on other things.
That is
4.39 is rich. Yeah, I mean, I know Trey is very, very fast. He is. I don't know all the data, but whenever I talk to those guys about GPA data, Trey is consistently putting up like 3 of the 5 fastest times over the course of a year. 4.39. Wow.
that is
I'd take the over. I think he'll run like a 4.41. Like I'm not trying to slight Trey, and I'd love to be wrong. I mean, I'd love to see that dude rip off a 4.37 or something, but 4.39 is freaking blazing.
that is really fast. The other receivers out there. Let me look here. Or sorry, the other running backs, not receivers. Excuse me. Bucky Irving at Oregon, 4.47. Blake Corum at Michigan, 4.45. Jalen Wright at Tennessee, who's like a legitimate kind of smaller speedster guy, 4.32. Audric Estime, who's a bit of a plotter, 4.5. And Will Shipley at Clemson, 4.43. Braylon Allen at Wisconsin, 4.44. So they have Trey. They have Trey as like the fastest non-scat back category, I guess we could say here on Prize Picks. His top speed is like he does not really get hawked down from behind once he gets going.
No.
I don't know how well his training's gone. Hopefully, well, like you said, with the health and the hamstrings, I guess we'll have to see there on that.
Fabian got a question in the chat. Yeah, no, I mean Fabian will be very, very interesting. Fabian has some great tape. Fabian performed really well at the All-Star game out in Texas as well. Obviously, he'll get poked and prodded like anybody that has past injuries, but I don't know. Yeah, defensive tackles, it's not maybe not as combine specific. I mean, you just can't have numbers that really are eyesores, but like nobody's really gonna choose a defensive tackle based off like, oh, this guy ran a 4.78 and this guy ran a 4.91 or something like that. It's tape, it's stuff that's hard to replicate at the combine. Again, you're going to want a bench in line with the position, but that's not something that's necessarily going to, soar you up a draft chart either. So, defensive tackle is a little bit of a different evaluation process when it comes to Indianapolis.
That I agree with you on that. There are certain positions that are more metric specific. For instance, I think it was Tej Seth who pointed this out the other day. There has never been a multi-year NFL starter at corner who didn't have this certain minimum broad jump at the combine, like ever. That's kind of a good bright line. Like if you want to get fired,
that'll provide some clarity. Certainly,
if you want to get fired as a GM, think you found the one outlier on that. Offensive tackle actually translates really well to the 40, which I would not really think.
I would not
guess. And I don't know if this works in high school, but in college, I guess it translates because like just those are your like the freaks are the big guys who can run that fast. Almost all of your best offensive tackles in the league ran really well.
Who was the Bama OT, like last name Smith, that took his top off, ran a 40? Was a mess.
Yes. Yeah. That was sloppy.
Yeah.
Probably not the best move did he run the combine like that or was that his pro day?
I can't remember. I think you got to run with a top on at the combine.
Andre Smith.
Yeah, Andre Smith. Yeah,
dude, he was
legendary.
He was moving. Like, I mean, there's a lot of him that was moving, but like also as a person, his person was moving down.
He could boogie.
Oh man, I think Florida State. I don't know if I had to set the number of guys to get drafted. Looking at some of these boards, I think we like some of these guys better than the NFL does. You know, are we jaded because we liked what they did in college? Possibly. I do think there's some chance they can get 10 drafted. It's just going to depend on you probably need some of your more fringy guys to go. And ultimately, as fans, you don't always root for these guys to get drafted. Sometimes it's better to be an undrafted free agent to go to a spot that works for you than it is to be like the second to last pick in the draft. You know, Brock Purdy would be making a hell of a lot more money right now if he didn't get drafted. You know,
He would. He would. Instead, he's got to settle for the 875 or whatever it is.
exactly. Tell me about this new stadium renovations, man.
Man, yeah, so it was great. So there was an event in Tallahassee last weekend for a lot of larger supporters of Florida State football, and the Battles End was able to invite a couple people as well. It was very interesting. I mean, it was a great look at just all that goes into it's hard for me to almost articulate just like the amount of work that goes into, like, say, a play call on 2nd and 7 or whatever. I mean, it's just there's so much stuff that goes in. I literally sat there as a fan and thought, as a, my how fortunate I've been able to do this, but, like, man, I make some criticisms based off stuff that's like, you don't you obviously surface level, and ultimately what you see at the surface level over a prolonged period of time ends up being right, but there's just so much that goes into so much stuff that you just don't realize without having a little bit more knowledge of that. But the two things that really popped out to a lot of people and caught people's eyes on social media is the issue of the stadium, and the renovations that are there. And as somebody who doesn't live in Tallahassee, but spent about 105 days in Tallahassee last year, I guess I kind of do at this point. I think maybe you just take for granted, if you're around the stadium all the time, just still how jarring that is for people when they walk up and see it for the first time, see that whole west side of the end zone removed. But they're definitely working their tail off, and every day I'm down there, somebody's working on something down there. So um, it's a work in progress. It's going to be what you would think is a significant jump forward when it comes to revenue generation. Also, the amenities that the stadium's able to offer, you would think, there'll be a pretty significant jump in the concession stand experience. Otherwise, know, all the things that you think of when you think of going to a modern NFL or NBA stadium, or the Braves. You can pick up a bottle of water, scan it on the way out, and your concession experience was 12 seconds long. There's just ways to modernize it and make transactions easier. But yeah, it's still jarring when you go in there and you see a third of the stadium missing, and the west side, the home side, that a lot of people have so many fond memories tied to. The other thing that caught the attention, particularly social media, was the um, Seminole Heritage jerseys that a couple people took photos of and took photos in. Yeah, they're they if you've seen the basketball jerseys, you've got a pretty good idea as to what they translate, as far as what they look like firsthand. Um, I have no idea as to whether or not that'll be used in a game sometime this year or any other year. We've seen mock-ups of stuff that took 3 or 4 years before they made an appearance on the field. We'll just have to see what happens with those. I will say that I think the relationship between Florida State and the Seminole Tribe is always a priority, and always something that they're looking to continue to grow and enhance. And um, those uniforms are born out of that. So I would keep that in mind as we see more of those. I think Bud and I, when it comes to the topic of uniforms, I think we're fairly similar aligned. I don't have a problem with the white uniform or the white helmet. I think it should be used sparingly, but I know the kids love it. But in general, your helmet is iconic. It's not just a joke or a punchline that we occasionally make about how the fact that 21 million people voted for it is the best helmet in the nation in one year, where Seminole fans who were particularly adept at technology were able to rig a series, or not rig, but outrigged the other people's attempts to rig it. Let's put it that way when it comes to online voting polls. But the uniform can be messed with a little bit. The helmet probably needs to, people need to be a little bit more cognizant of that. In my personal opinion, I don't know that we ever need to see a black FSU helmet again.
Agreed.
But yeah, those kind of blue or turquoise, if you want to call them that, uniforms are sharp. I know the players love them. Wouldn't shock me if you don't see them at some point in time, but I don't know that there's a definitive plan for that either.
I just, to me, the helmet's the iconic thing. That's the thing that has really not changed that much over the years. It's very identifiable. You have the tomahawks. It's you have the spear. Like, it's the helmet. The jersey has changed a million times. In my lifetime, I'm basically 40. It's, if you're like 60, it's changed 100 million times. It sometimes we look like Boston College, sometimes we don't. Like, there's so many different iterations of the jersey. Like, to me, the jersey's not iconic. That's not a jersey I look at as a random college football fan. If you took the helmet off and you took the pants off, in some iterations of it, I'm like, that's not obviously identifiably FSU. Now, if you're a hardcore college football fan, it is. But I think like every casual football fan out there is like, oh, that's the FSU helmet. That's the thing that you don't mess with. And in some school, like Michigan changes their jersey all the time. You know what they don't really change? The helmet, right? I guess Penn State, they did change it up. They went with a stripe the one time, and it was like, oh my God. So yeah. Let me see some other questions here from the chat that are good. Christian Suero says it took 1 month to the deconstruction of the Southwest Grandstand. So why is this a 2-summer project? What are they doing between now and August? Not challenging them, just actually curious.
I think it's just I think it's incredibly involved to gut a stadium of that size and put it back together again. I mean, I know the plans, and this has always been the plan. So um, I think Populous is the name of the country, or the name of the company that's doing these. They've done several very, very large scale projects. So I mean, these guys have an idea as to what timelines will be. Um, I don't, want to speak from any place of authority on this, but it's my understanding they had to there's just things that you have to do a project of that size, and maybe one of the first steps was to resecure the west side, the press box, the suites, all that stuff are still there. So there was work that had to be done before they could even start the demo, and I do think that once this stuff comes online, it will be first in class from a collegiate perspective, and will be a significant change. But it does take time to do that. And then every plan that I ever heard of was always going to be for temporary seating for the 2024 stadium. So I don't think it's a surprise that this is a project, of the scale and length that it is. And I don't look, Michael Alford is ultimately the authority on this matter, and as is Stephen Ponder of the Boosters, etc. But I don't think they're necessarily going to take down the east side, but I do think there's going to be a pretty comprehensive amount of work done on the east side as far as the interior of it once the west side is done. So there will be construction surrounding Doak Campbell probably until 2026 or so would be my guess.
You just, you have people have such a hard time getting to games as you fight the modern amenities, especially because of the experience that everybody got during COVID. Of 70-inch TVs are cheap now, right? My fridge with my cold beer is right there in my house. Like, the seating's more comfortable. You have to find more ways to get people to the stadium. Now, look, this doesn't really hit with Nolecast listeners, right? Because Nolecast listeners, for the most part, are the most diehard supporters out there. Okay. Y'all would come to the games if it was standing only. And some of y'all do stand only. No business, for the most part, is going to make a killing. And you do it for a business. We cover a business. Like, let's just be kind of naked about this. No business can work with only its diehards, for the most part. Okay. You have to find a way to attract the casuals to come up. You have to eliminate the excuses. You have to create experiences that are not replicable in your home. Okay. That's one of the reasons why you had Champions Club. Now, people at home sit and watch, say Champions Club's empty. On the outside, sometimes it is. On the inside, it's packed, man. Like, at least when I get up there and see it, like, there's a lot of folks inside Champions Club. Having more experiences, like more things you can take. There's baseball stadiums now that have 6-hole putt courses. You can just take your kids to do other stuff during the ball game. So yeah, it's a hard stadium to get to. You got to make sure that the experience is sort of a can't miss experience, and that's just a lot of teams out there are dealing with that. We get a lot of emails to our inbox, nolecast@gmail.com, who complain about this, and they're like, "Hey, look at this team. They're not doing this." I'm like, yeah, they've got a major metropolitan city 45 minutes away.
Mm-hmm.
Everybody day trips Tuscaloosa. Okay, everybody a lot of these, yeah, exactly, man. Almost everyone needs a hotel in Tallahassee, and they need a reservation, which is a great time for us to talk about Charlie Park, by the way, because Charlie Park for the spring game is the spot to be. Hit us with the details, man. What we got?
No, absolutely. Yeah. No, thanks for throwing me straight into that. No, I was fortunate enough to spend some time with Matt Thompson this weekend, and he's very excited about the future of Florida State football and very excited about the spring game. Encouraging people to make reservations, whether it be Thursday, Friday, or Saturday. They do have their brunch on Saturday and Sunday. A little bit of a change in that they're moving to the a la carte model as opposed to what they previously were doing as far as a grazing lunch. But man, Charlie Park's awesome. I went there 3 or 4 different times throughout the course of the season, right over there by the Cascades where, so many people are living. It's got a great place next to it. There are a lot of players and professionals and otherwise live there. It's one of the better spots in Tallahassee that I've seen. And the fact that you can walk 2 minutes and be at Charlie Park only makes it better. So whether you're in that area because you're staying at the AC Marriott that it's attached to or whatever else, keep in mind Charlie Park, one of the premier places in Tallahassee and always one of the premier options for, just to elevate your Florida State experience that much more, whether you're coming in for a spring game, coming in for a game during the season, or whatever reason you find yourself in Tallahassee.
Absolutely, man. It should be an awesome time. One of the reasons why I like having the live chat when we do this is we get questions. And sometimes these questions clue me in as a host that maybe we didn't fully flush this out. So Brandon Solomon asked, is there going to be one empty side of the stadium this season? I haven't kept up on the renovation aside from seeing the pictures. That's a great question for us to take because you and I both know, no, there's not going to be an empty side. They're going to have temporary seating. That's one of the reasons why they're using 2 summers. Like they're not going to play a game in front of 25,000 people all year. So there will be temporary seating on that side. The suites on that side, I believe, will obviously still be open as well. So no, there will be temporary seating, which is kind of a pain to put in too, and then take down. But I feel for all the folks whose longtime season tickets, went away or got relocated, or some probably got priced out. Some are probably gonna have to sit more in the sun. Maybe they can find a way to create an enormous shade thing at some point, which would be awesome to make the other side of the stadium a little more habitable for some of those noon games. But no, there will be temporary seating.
Nope.
Let me ask you this. Hypothetically, let's say that eligibility requirements, not eligibility, eligibility restrictions, like you only get to play, 4 seasons of play. Let's say those go away. And I think eventually they will because the Miami kid is getting his 9th year. And some of these federal courts are increasingly, especially in that Illinois one, recognizing a right to earn a living playing college football. Now, imputedly via NIL right now, but I think as we see that could be quickly moving in multiple directions. I'm trying perfect planner for this. I don't know if Jordan's a perfect, but he is, I think, potentially a good one. Like a Dylan Gabriel, would be one. Maybe Talia, guys who probably aren't going to get drafted, but are really good at college. That's sort of your perfect plan if you're to assume, look, man, I have a professional college football skill set, not a professional NFL skill set. And I realize the absurdity of the statement. I'm not in a bubble here. I'm trying to see what's coming down. Am I crazy to think that would have been a better path for Jordan Travis because he could play another like 5 years and make, I don't know, like according to reports out there, a lot of these top quarterbacks, make close to $1 million or sometimes a little more. Like it's very foreseeable that a guy like a Jordan who doesn't really have as much of an NFL skill set, may or may not get drafted. Unfortunately, obviously, due to the injury that plays into that, that he could play like another 5 years, do really, really well, and make a lot more money doing that than he would have, risking going to the NFL. I don't know how far off we are from this, or if I really even have a question. Some of these guys would have a lot of value for their longtime attachment to the school. You know,
Um, it's going to be very interesting, bud. I mean, there are guys that I could see this being, they could be an 8-year college player, and um, good deal. Just had a little panic attack that I had 11 o'clock meeting or 10 o'clock meeting that I'd forgot, but nope, it's 11 o'clock. So, good stuff. There are guys that I could think of. Look, yeah, I almost don't want to mention them because I don't want to slide them. I want all these kids to have as good of an experience as possible. Okay, here's a kid that I think. Um, this dude's awesome. I love talking to him. He's very talented as a football player and is beginning to produce really good content. If you've had a chance to look at some of the Battles End stuff that they've done with Big Meech or that we've done with Big Meech, he interviews players. It is a unique perspective. I think the content's getting better, and Meech has a future at doing this. Is Meech going to be a first round pick or something like that in April? No, he's not. He might be a late round pick. Maybe be an undrafted free agent. Guy's very, if he isn't doing content, I think he'll be coaching. Guy has a sharp football mind, has a bright future ahead of him, and tied to the sport doing something. But can Meech be your, starter at right guard for the next 6 or 7 years? Had eligibility requirements not been there? Yeah, I could very much see that being the case. And, you know, that's a piece you could build around, go out, occasionally take a shot at the 5-star tackle or whatever, but know that you've got your interior of your line kind of settled for the foreseeable future. So, yeah, this will be interesting to see. And you're right, some of the language that is coming out of certain courtrooms is more and more talking about this as denial of access to employment. And would it shock me if you don't see a guy play linebacker for for Georgia Tech for 8 years or something like that in the future? No, it wouldn't. And in fact, I think if it's a coin flip, it may be a little better of a 50-50 chance that we see that at some point in the next decade or so.
yeah, I agree with you. Honestly, like as far as offensive line, dude, a lot of the unwatchable college football comes from just youth on the offensive line being unable to block.
Hmm.
If you let us have like 25 and 26-year-old, like not NFL talents, clearly, because if they were NFL talents, they'd be in the NFL or most likely would be in the NFL. But guys who just know what the heck they're doing, who are grown men, that would be, as far as quality of play viewing, better. There's a lot of like negatives that come along with this. Like I'm not blind to that. I'm actually not in favor of this. I'm against this, to be honest. But I think it's not an inevitability, but I think it's a likelihood that we get. I think as from just reading these things, it's like, all right, they're kind of finding a right to make a living playing college football. This is not that far off,
Hmm.
especially if you could demonstrate that you have a college skill set, not a pro skill set. It sort of creates that differentiation as to where you can't just go play NFL ball. You're playing uh, professional professional college football player is still one of the weirdest sentences I think we'll ever be able to say. You know, um, but yeah, like there's certain guys. I think Meach is a great example. A dude who is like a solid college player. I would be absolutely shocked if he got drafted. Maybe he does, and that would be incredible for him. I would be not shocked, but a little bit surprised if he made an NFL roster for more than a year or two. But he is on FSU's roster. If he was still around, I think he'd have a pretty damn good shot to and healthy start for you. So, yeah, it's interesting times in which we live. Other things on the rundown. I'm going to skip the question we got on is Florida's schedule actually that much harder than FSU's? We can kind of run some modeling on that. We're over an hour. Norvell's buyout is what, like 6 million, I think, right now. If he leaves within the next year and it goes down from there, you don't have a lot of leverage. Okay, you're not in the SEC. Norvell's a very in-demand coach. I think he has a great setup in Tallahassee, honestly, for his style of coaching and for how he wants to run things for the most part. That's not saying that there aren't more ideal setups out there. I don't think there are that many, at least in the short term. But Norvell and his agent, Jimmy Sexton, are not idiots. They're not going to lock themselves long term into a situation which at this point is uncertain. And by the uncertainty, I mean specifically FSU and the ACC. So you didn't go into that negotiation with a ton of leverage. They held the cards. And it's honestly sometimes good that you have a coach that holds the cards because it means you got a good coach.
Mhm.
So
True. As long as you're not assessing, the cards that he holds every year, then, yeah, I think you're happy to do it. So,
yeah, 100%. That's all I got for today, man. You got anything else?
no, good stuff, man. Good stuff. I
Enjoyed it.
feel like that was a solid hour and 5, and, not always easy to do in February, so.
Oh, have you heard any rumors on Jared Verse? Because I guess he's 4.58 on the Prize Picks.
Ooh, I mean, that's a might be a little bit of an aggressive time, but I don't know. I've never seen
Yeah.
Jared run to 40. I just also
Um,
know that Jared's one of the more singularly focused guys that I've ever encountered, and Jared's been, I think, out in Arizona getting ready for the draft, and uh, yeah, 4.58 I would be surprised by, but wouldn't put anything past him.
I will give you guys one. I don't think that JJ McCarthy should be 4.63 if Michael Penix is 4.64. I think McCarthy's a better athlete than Penix is.
Hmm.
So I don't know if the right way to play that is more on Penix's 40 time or less on McCarthy's. I'll kind of leave that up to you. But yeah, I think McCarthy is faster than Penix by more than
Okay.
0.01.
All right.
So
Never know what you're going to
we'll
get
see.
67 minutes into the Nolecast. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Last thing. This is not a super positive thing, but it is some data that has been coming out and I think possibly explains part of Jordan's draft stock stuff. Some of these guys who have come into the league who are older, Kenny Pickett being one, obviously, who had a baller like final season. That there is increasingly some analytics that say like some of these guys are balling in college because they're older, and like they're kind of getting docked NFL wise for that. There's been a couple
Hmm.
recently. Will
Okay.
Levis as well, who came back and killed it. So I don't know. We'll see. Hopefully Jordan gets super healthy and could show out, at some later date. And I can't wait for it.
Cool.
So awesome, man.
Good stuff.
I will see you next time.
All right, brother.
I got to go to IMG for their pro day, so should be a good
Okay.
time.
Yeah.
Awesome. I'll see you, buddy.
All right, dude.